From the early to mid-1950s, the U.S. Navy was on a constant search for a nuclear strike bomber that was capable of long ranges, all-weather operation, and with a high enough payload capacity that it could carry an extremely heavy nuclear weapon. The Douglas A-3 Skywarrior fulfilled some of these roles, but it was never quite as sleek or as capable in the nuclear strike role as the Navy wanted it to be. But in 1953, North American Aviation had privately begun a study to develop a carrier-based, long-range, all-weather nuclear strike bomber. They understood that the Navy was being left behind in regards to nuclear weapons delivery systems. They presented this plan to the Navy, who signed off on it in 1955. Shortly after, in August of 1956, they awarded North American Aviation a contract to produce a prototype that would take its first flight in August of 1958 in Columbus, Ohio. When it was introduced, the Vigilante was one of the largest aircraft to ever operate on an aircraft carrier. Designated as a heavy by the U.S. Navy, the A-5 was surprisingly agile for its size. Its sleek, low-drag design, powerful twin GE J79 engines made even escort fighters take notice, as this was no A-3 Skywarrior. It was much faster, much more agile, and much more powerful. There were drawbacks, however. All of this high-speed aeronautical design work on the aircraft meant that it needed a high approach speed and a high angle of attack when landing, which resulted in lots of wear and tear on the landing gear and the aircraft restraint cables on the flight deck. The A-5 was a very complex aircraft for its time. It had one of the first fly-by-wire systems ever put into a plane, which featured mechanical backups in case of failure. It also featured a computerized navigation and attack system incorporating a heads-up display, a multi-mode radar system, and all of this was ran by an early digital computer known as Verdun. The Bombay was one of the most unique features of the A-5. It utilized a system of loading known as storage train. 2 disposable fuel tanks and a single Mach-28 nuclear weapon would be loaded into the Bombay from the rear of the aircraft in a linear fashion. Then a removable tail cone would be put back on to seal the Bombay up. The 2 disposable fuel tanks would provide the bomber with enough fuel to reach the intended target at supersonic speeds. Then once over the target, an explosive charge would be used to fire the 2 fuel tanks and the nuclear weapon out of the rear of the jet like a bullet. This unique bomb delivery method allowed the A-5 to drop a nuclear weapon while cruising at over 1,300 miles per hour if needed. This design had its pitfalls, however. There were 3 occasions that the shock of the catapult launching the plane off the ship that caused the fuel tanks to fly backwards out of the aircraft on takeoff. 1 aircraft was reported lost due to this type of incident. The plane entered service in June of 1961, and the Navy designated the plane the A3J-1. He accomplished this by pushing the aircraft to Mach 2.1, then pulling up hard using the momentum of the plane to do the rest. They didn't stop climbing until the engines flamed out. Then the aircraft rolled onto his back and began to descend. The pilots already had performed a maneuver like this before, and simply released the controls, allowing the plane to regain stability as it entered into thicker air. This new record held for 13 years, until it was finally broken by a MiG-25. In the early 1960s, the A-5 was entering service. There was a major policy shift in the Navy. This affected many aircraft entering service that had originally been designed specifically for nuclear weapon delivery. The Navy had been developing ballistic missiles alongside its various aircraft projects, all with the end goal of nuclear weapon delivery. But by the early 1960s, ballistic missiles, combined with nuclear-powered submarines, proved to be the clear path for the role of delivering a nuclear weapon to the Soviet Union. This caused many aircraft to become obsolete almost instantly. Some planes were better suited to being adapted to a new, more conventional role, such as reconnaissance or a tactical bomber, like the A-3 Skywarriors. Others were not. As a result of this new shift, in 1963, the Navy stopped buying A-5s. They didn't need them anymore for nuclear weapon delivery, and its unconventional Bombay meant that it wasn't well suited to being converted to a conventional bomber. Ironically, the A-3 Skywarrior suddenly was brought back as a tactical bomber for the Navy. It was better suited for the role. But the Navy knew the A-5 was still valuable. The capability to have a supersonic, long-range aircraft be based on an aircraft carrier wasn't lost on them. All of the A-5B planes were converted over to the RA-5C fast reconnaissance planes. In total, 10 squadrons of these aircraft were in service at the beginning of the Vietnam War. 8 of them would see extensive service in the war, beginning in 1964. They were used in hazardous, medium-level post-strike missions, sent in to inspect damage caused by the U.S. bombing missions and to update target information. The early service years for the plane were rough. There were many growing pains, especially with all the advanced systems the plane was equipped with. Most of these reliability issues were eventually worked out as maintenance personnel gained experience with these new systems. But the A-5 remained a high-maintenance aircraft throughout its service life. Even with its speed and maneuverability, 18 A-5s were lost in combat in Vietnam, 14 of them to anti-aircraft fire, 3 to surface-to-air missiles, and 1 to a MiG-21. 9 additional aircraft would be lost to operational accidents. Because of these losses, 36 more A-5s were ordered to be built from 1968 to 1970 as replacements. Although the plane served the Navy honorably, and its surprising usefulness as a low-altitude reconnaissance platform, it was a maintenance black hole and was expensive to repair. It was also deemed overly complex for a plane used primarily as a reconnaissance aircraft. Not to mention it was large and took up a lot of space on an aircraft carrier. Smaller, more versatile aircraft have been shown to be more than adequate to replace the A-5. Namely, the Vought F-8 Crusader, modified with cameras, was already serving the same role at much less cost. Towards the final days of the Vietnam War in 1974, the last of the A-5 squadrons were disbanded. The last A-5s completed their final deployment in 1979 on board the USS Ranger in the Western Pacific, and the aircraft completed its final flight on November 20, 1979 at Naval Air Station Key West. The A-3 Skywarrior, however, was still in the air long after the A-5 was being used as a museum display piece or rotting in a boneyard. The A-3 would carry on as a photo reconnaissance aircraft, an electronic warfare platform, area refueling tanker, and even a transport plane well into the 1990s. It just goes to show you, yes, you may be the fastest, you may be the sexiest, you may be the smartest, but are you useful? There are around 13 A-5 Vigilantes on display around the country, so if you need to see one in person, it's pretty doable. Hey guys, thanks for watching my videos. I really appreciate all the comments and likes I get. I enjoy reading all your stories. I try to reply to as many of them as possible. I can't get to all of them, obviously. I have 3 kids, so I'm pretty busy most of the time. Keep liking, keep commenting, keep subscribing, and I'll keep the videos coming. Thanks.